I'm Liz Dyer, founder of Mama Bears, an organization dedicated to supporting, educating, and empowering families with LGBTQ members and the LGBTQ community. Today, I'm excited to be here with Maleea Castillo, a Mama Bear and a member of the LGBTQ community. Maleea did what society expected of her. She married a man and started a family. After 27 years of marriage, 5 kids, and one of her kids coming out as a member of the LGBTQ community, Maleea told her husband she was a lesbian and that for her own well-being, she needed to start living her life as her true, authentic self. I'm excited that Maleea is here to tell her story today. I think we can gain a lot of insight and wisdom from her because she's not only a mama bear, but also a member of the LGBTQ community. Maleea, thank you for being here with us today.
Hi, Liz. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited that you're going to share your story. I think our stories are so powerful. They help us get connected with other people. They're very informative and educational, so people have more understanding. And I think telling our stories is healing, not just for ourselves, but for people who hear our stories. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you.
So let's get started from the beginning on your story. Tell us what it was like as a young child. What kind of family did you grow up in? What was going on there?
Okay. Well, I grew up in a loving home. I have a brother and a sister. My parents have been together over 50 years, and it was good. I grew up in a small town in the Texas Panhandle. Um, Graduated high school with 48 kids, so it was pretty tiny. But my parents always provided what we needed. It was a lot of fun and exciting. The old school neighborhoods that were small. You left the house in the morning when the sun came out, and you didn't come back home until the sunset. So, it was good. It was good. Mom and dad were good folks, still are. Um, so
Small town life. That's
small,
interesting in itself.
yes, makes it a little harder for folks like me, but
Yes.
yeah, it has its perks.
When did you first think that you might be different? That and maybe you didn't have the language or the understanding to know exactly what was going on, but reflecting back, when did you first have an inkling that you might not be attracted to guys the way that most girls your age was?
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I think as an adult, because for me, it's so different for everybody. And so for me, as I got older, in my 20s, early 30s, it became I had more understanding, more feelings of what was really going on. And it wasn't until that place in life for me as kind of a young adult that I could look back at my childhood and put new words to the things that were going on then. So, I had moments in elementary school where I think I knew I felt different, but didn't really know why. Certain friendships that were different than other friendships. I felt more like a tomboy. I wanted to do all the things that the boys were doing, but I didn't necessarily like to have relationships with them. Even friendships were odd with them. I always gravitated more towards the girls for different, all the growing up reasons. And even the same as I got older in high school, I dated boys. It always felt different. There were crushes on boys, but there were crushes on girls too. And it wasn't until I got older that that became that I became more aware of what all that really was and what it meant. So I think I probably struggled most with it my junior and senior year of high school, and then and then gosh, I graduated high school in 1991, and it wasn't until 2005 when I finally had enough understanding and enough knowing and enough vocabulary to really say in my head, still couldn't say it out loud, but in my head to say that I am indeed a lesbian. And all of these quote unquote weird feelings, were same sex attraction. And excuse me. And so at that point in '05, then looking back, and it's like, oh my goodness, that's what this one was in this grade, and all the different moments became clear, actually so clear that it sent me in a downward spiral of mental health problems. And but it took a long time, and I think that's where a lot of people who don't have stories like mine say things. Well, they don't realize that it is so different for everybody. And so even for example, I had one of my friends, well, she's not a friend anymore, but someone say to me, oh, so you're gay now. And it's like, well, I mean, no, I've always been, but it's just this process that your body goes through. And, and there's so many factors that play into that, that undoing, that digging out process of figuring out what all this internal stuff is. And some people
Exactly.
quickly, some people reach that at different times in life. And
Well, and also too, when you were growing up, no one was encouraging you
no,
to try to discover your true self. There was no representation or visibility of people who were not heterosexual
absolutely.
in books or movies or TV series. Most of us from you know that generation
Mhm.
didn't have friends or family members who had come out.
Right.
Same-sex marriage wasn't legal, so we didn't see that
Right.
happening. So
Absolutely.
without that kind of representation and visibility, a young person just expects themselves to be what
Mhm.
society is presenting to them. And
Exactly.
so really any indication that we're different, I think would be you know um approached in a way that, well, that's bad, let me try to get back on track and just be
Right.
what I'm supposed to be. So
Right.
there's no room for self-discovery there.
Absolutely. And I even have, even in that small town that I grew up in, I have vivid memories of, so I have several cousins in the LGBTQ plus community. Some are older than me, some are younger than me. And I remember growing up, and I come from a big family, and it was it was tiptoed around. I remember feeling, we just didn't really talk a whole lot about it. The words homosexual was never used. Um, it it was taboo, and so you learned real quick with the adults around you in their body language and tone and in conversation. You learn real quick as a young person when things are out of the norm or awkward. And I think I knew even then that I I fit into that somehow, because I always connected. There was always an odd sense of connection with those people. Um, but I didn't dare, I just I didn't know why. I wasn't for sure, that there was just not as much clarity in why at that age until I got much older. And even in high school, I mean, I graduated with a few folks in the LGBTQ community, but when we graduated, no one was out, you know, and some of those folks were some of my best friends. We oddly, you find your people and you connect, even though when you're not real sure of the underlying connection.
I think a lot of people have that same story. I can look back on my own son's high school years,
Mhm.
and that was before he came out. And yes, I can see that he connected to
Mhm.
to kids in his high school that were of that community. Maybe they weren't out then, but
Right.
you're right. There, you
Yeah.
do find your people. I You've probably heard other people say the same thing, that there's a trend these days for young people to claim to be members of the LGBTQ community. But
Yes.
I think the trend is that we are encouraging young people to discover their
Yeah.
true self, and that
Absolutely.
they don't have to fit into a particular box. And that leads to these young people growing into much more healthy and whole adults, which I think part of your story also demonstrates that, because as you were saying, in 2005, you everything started to come together for you. But
Mhm.
instead of that being a time, really a aha, great moment, oh, I'm figuring out who I am, it was devastating to you, and it kind of put you into a whole mental health crisis.
It did, absolutely. It was a significant, um, crisis. I mean, I had given up. In that moment, I honestly had thoughts that it would probably be better if I weren't around, um, than to break up a family. My family, I had 3 kids at the time, and so, yeah, it was significant in many ways.
So did you talk to anybody about what you were discovering about yourself? How did react to that?
Well, I oddly or sadly, maybe both, I did end up getting therapy. I started, and I think mainly, even in that moment, even though inside my head I knew what was happening, I never said it out loud to anyone, but I knew I needed some kind of help because I was so sick that I didn't care if I died. I weighed 115 pounds wet, and so one of my best friends could tell something was happening, and she encouraged me into just getting therapy. She didn't know why at the time, and so I did. So I started seeing just a therapist, um, who then realized how severe I was, how bad it had gotten. So then she also got me hooked up with a psychotherapist for med management, and then ended up with a third therapist who specialized in EMDR.
Did you ever tell any of the therapists that you were seeing that
Mm,
you believed you were a lesbian?
okay. Yeah. No, I never did. Um, in fact, I used a situation from my childhood where one of my dear friends, a friend that I know now, was a crush. I always wanted to be around her. I loved being at her house. I liked it when she was at my house. We both were tomboys. We did all the outdoorsy stuff, and it was great. Um, you know, it was a bit of a bum day if she and I weren't getting to hang out. Um, and this was elementary, but you know, that in that friendship, there was a time where we were playing house and some exploring was going on, and there was some kisses on the cheek and a couple of little pecks on the lips. Nothing other than that. But I remember it feeling good, and I remember it feeling normal and even natural, oddly. Um, but I also remember it afterwards being terrified because girls don't do that. And
Because you felt like you should think it was wrong.
correct, right. By the time you're second, third, fourth grade, it's like, no, girls are not kissing girls. That's not even, it's wrong. And why was that nice?
So
And
you were telling your therapist about this.
correct. Yes. But I changed the narrative on the situation and made it as if I didn't like it. It was uncomfortable. That there was a little bit, that I was taken advantage of, that I felt cornered and I had to do it, which none of that was true. But that's what I told the therapist out of fear of, I think, what I knew was coming. And I was just so hopeful and desperate that if I told all of these therapists that I didn't like it, that it was wrong, and help process those negative feelings, that somehow there would be a twist in the processing of all of that in my brain and in my body, that it would help me not be gay, because I knew that's where this was headed. And I needed to do whatever I could to stop that, or to get rid of it, or whatever. Like, I just knew, I'd been married many years at this point, and had 3 great kids, and admitting that I was gay and enjoyed kissing her in elementary, was gonna break up my family and devastate them all and the kids. And
So how long were you in therapy at that time?
almost 3 years.
Hmm.
The EMDR lasted about 18 months, I
So
think.
you were using EMDR hoping that
Mhm,
it would make you straight.
mhm. I did,
You were
yeah.
hoping that it would make these feelings so negative that
Mhm.
you would stop having them.
Correct. That was my hope, that I could, yeah, that I could process it in some weird way, um, that I could get to that point, and the point of suppressing it deep enough that it wouldn't be an issue, that I could accept that it was wrong and move on.
Now, were you guys, especially religious, connected to any kind of faith community? Do you think anything like that was having an impact on you?
No, I really don't. I mean, I didn't grow up in a strict Christian home. I would go to church, every once in a while with my grandmother when she went. There was a period in high school, probably my freshman and sophomore year, that I went quite a bit, due to just some friends and their family. And then a couple of years after I was married and worked at a children's home, we had some kiddos that were rooted in a Baptist church. So we spent a couple of years doing that. So, I mean, I knew what the Bible said, but I never really dwelled on it for some reason. Um, so that didn't really affect me, I think, like it does a lot of folks.
So this was really mostly about, it started with your own immediate family
Mhm.
and their views. And then now you've gone and married and had kids, and you know if you come out as a lesbian, that this is going to have a huge impact on the family that you've created.
Right. Yeah. I think I think I was honestly most worried and focused about my family that my ex and I had built, you know, because we were so young. I was 19. We were both 19 when we got married, 18, and started having kids at 20. So, you know, he and I grew up together, and we were best friends. We were best friends in high school. We were best friends throughout our marriage. We did everything together. We never fought. You know, it was great. I loved him, and that was, you know, I wasn't coming out. I wasn't or coming out then when in the 05-ish area. I wasn't too worried about friends and family. I was most fearful of what it would do to my ex-husband and the kids. And I
So
think
did
that's
you
why.
ever talk to your ex-husband about it during that period?
Nope, I did not. Not
So
until.
what happened at the end of this three-ish period, three-ish year period, where you stopped going to therapy? Did you feel like you had accomplished something? I mean, were you feeling better, more healthy, more hopeful? Because I do talk to a lot of people who go through different forms of conversion therapy, and
Right.
sometimes they do get to the point
Mhm.
for a period of time where they believe they've changed.
Right. Well, I think there was a few things that happened. So right before 2005 nervous breakdown, that's what, or my therapist calls it, a nervous breakthrough. But regardless, it happened. And right before I hit rock bottom, I had had another miscarriage. And so during and I think that's real, that was like the icing on the cake. Like that happened, and it just was like, I'm done, you know? And so then years of therapy, and around the 3-year mark, two things happened. I got pregnant again with our fourth, and we got word that we had to move. So we were leaving one city and moving to another. And so honestly, I think the pregnancy was a bit of a reality check, because my kids, you know, were my life, and I had a baby to protect. I had to get healthy. I had to, you know, do things so that my body could take care of this baby. And then we moved. And we moved quite a bit, about every 3 to 5 years, it seems. And sometimes that was a good reset for me. It was a distraction. It was something new. It was a new home to prepare, you know, all the things. So moving and getting pregnant gave me um, more time. It was like a reset of a new time frame, for lack of better words, honestly. So as long as I remained distracted with new projects and new things, um, it would buy me time, you know, another couple of years. I can do this. I can do, you know, so it was like in increments. For a few years, I got this. And then change of scenery. Few years, I got this. Change of scenery. Same with having the kids. You know, about every 4 years, we would have another one. Same thing. But it, it, the therapy did help me, and I still don't fully get or understand some of this, but in doing in manipulating the therapy the way I did, I always was you know, I was always very tomboy. I dressed more masculine ish at time, you know, at times for whatever reasons. I don't know if that was to keep other women from looking at me, or to try to make myself less attractive for my ex-husband. I honestly don't really know. That's still something I think about off a lot. But I did come away from therapy feeling more feminine, more myself, even though I couldn't live life at that time. I could not live life the way I knew I needed to be living it. But there was some strange shift in just feeling more like me. And I know that sounds strange.
No, it doesn't. I mean, obviously, when you were going to therapy, you were also talking a lot, thinking a lot,
Mhm.
processing a lot. And so, even against, I mean, I guess what I come away thinking about that part of your story is that even with all the outward resistance that
Mhm.
you were putting your energy and effort into,
Mhm.
there was this spirit inside of you, this
Yeah,
human spirit that was still driving you to
yeah,
be your true self. And I think that is something that's so beautiful about the human spirit is the way I think we are designed to be who we were truly created to be. And
right.
that even with society and our own efforts to oppress that, there's still something inside of us
Right.
that really yearns for that and tries to work towards that. So
Yeah.
I can see how being in therapy would even start to unleash that, even though that's not what you wanted.
Right. Yeah, it definitely did. And it felt good, which even for me to say sounds strange, but in the attempt to change who I was, I came away feeling good with some of the things that came out of it.
Okay, so you went through all this. You kind of survived by these resets and distractions in life.
Yeah.
But what was it that finally led you to come out to someone? And who was the first person you came out to?
Oh goodness. Well, I'm trying to think. The very first person I came out to, I think there were actually 3. I feel like there may have been 3 people that were all within the same time frame of a week or so, and it would have been my sister and one of my dear friends, Sarah, excuse me, and you. And, I think that's where I kept it for quite a while, for a few years. Um,
What made you come out at that time?
well, I think at that time, gosh,
Now, your child had already come out.
yes, yes. So I have, yes, my oldest came out at the age of 15. And that's when our fourth, like right after the nervous breakdown, and I got pregnant with our fourth. So she was about 6 months old when our oldest daughter came out. And it was, so, I knew then that I had to continue to be tight-lipped about this because, um, life for me was about my kids, and in that moment, I knew that she needed me to be there for her, to advocate for her, to support her and love her and do all these things. So that's what we did. And then I guess she was 15. She was roughly a freshman in high school. Excuse me. And I think it was I believe it was her senior year of high school. Um, maybe, well, around that time frame that I had just gotten to a place again where kind of like back in '05, the nervous breakdown, I was looping back mentally, and I just couldn't do it. I was exhausted again. It had been a long year. Um, And I decided to tell my ex at that time. And it didn't go well. It was very scary. We were on the front porch for 4 hours, bawling and crying and talking and processing. It wasn't yelling, screaming, fighting. It was just confusion, frustration, sadness, fear, all the things. Um, and by then our fourth child was in second grade. And so it was a lot. And I think at the end of that, after a couple of days, and feeling what that did to the dynamic of our marriage and our friendship, we had more talks about it. And I decided in that moment that I couldn't do it. So I tried to stuff the cat back in the bag and agreed to go to Christian counseling with him, to figure out, why am I having same-sex attractions? Like, what has happened in my past that causes me to lean towards that? And maybe, it was a bisexual thing. Maybe I'm not a lesbian. Maybe I'm just bisexual. And, if we work on our marriage, that would address some of the same-sex feelings that I was having. And of course, that Christian counselor therapist had all sorts of reasons that I would be experiencing same-sex
So you went
feelings.
to a Christian counselor at this time.
This time I did, yes. And it was rough. It was hard. But, at that time frame, and he and I went together for a while, but then when we realized I was the problem in some of those sessions, then he stopped, and I continued to see her for a while. And even in those sessions, there was manipulation. I knew what I knew, and she did what she thought she needed to do to try to turn me to the other side. I remember seeing ex-gay books and things in her office that were pulled out due to our sessions. And
So at this time, you had not connected with the mama bears yet?
I had.
Oh, you had.
I had. And so I had this, in fact, I think, yeah, I had, because I had already told you.
Oh, okay.
And
So you going to this Christian counselor was after you had already told Sarah and me and your sister.
Yeah, and I was doing that. That was my cover up. Basically, it was my cover up to try to help mend what I had done by trying to tell him the truth. And if I were totally honest, there was, I'm sure, a piece in me that thought, well, maybe it'll work this time.
Yeah.
Maybe this therapist will be different. Maybe something will be different, and I really can come out of this, put my family back together, and we live happily ever after. Because that's still, even in that moment, even when I knew what I knew, you as a stay-at-home mom and 4 kids, and we had a great family. There's still that hope that this is going to change, so that your family and your kids don't become a statistic.
Yeah.
Because it's a honest fear.
Oh, yeah. So how long did you go to the Christian therapist?
I did that probably about a year.
And so you came out of that and you told your husband and yourself what?
Well, you mean like when I finished, what
Yeah.
was like after I finished? Well, I stopped. We moved from one side of town to the other side of town. um, during that, and it was again that shift, that move, that it just made sense to stop. And also, I got pregnant again. This was that time frame when, after our fourth kiddo, I had my tubes tied back in '06. And now we're roughly 2015, 2016, when all of this is happening. And I just thought I was sick one weekend and had the bug, but it turns out I was pregnant. And so the move and me being pregnant and therapy and all of that was kind of happening at the same time.
Yeah, I think I was with you that weekend.
You
Whenever
were?
you,
Yes,
yes,
we were. We were in Nashville. Yeah. Yeah. So that was a shock to the system, because I think I was getting close to telling him again. I think by the time, and I may be off a little, I should have prepared some sort of a timeline, but at some point with this Christian counselor, no, that was the same time frame, because I was pregnant while I was seeing her. So
yeah, I do think I recall that you telling me that you were getting to the point where you thought you wanted to talk to your husband about this again,
right,
that
right,
it was just too painful to
right,
keep this stuffed and to carry on with this secret and this denial.
right. Yeah. And then when I found out I was pregnant, it was it was
Bad timing.
bad timing. It was a repeat of, I can't, I really, and so I think in that moment, um, and I even remember having a few conversations with Sarah of just, this is it. It's my fate. Like, I have to stay here. I have to be with him. I care about him. He's a good dad. We've had a great life and we've got wonderful kids. And that's just what it is. That's what it's going to be. That's what it has to be. And so I tried that for um, about 2 or 3 more years, I think. I think the fifth one was almost 3, about to be 3, when I told him for real this time. Yeah.
Yeah, and this time when you told him, you were, even though you were sad, you were ready to kind of move through the process.
Right. Right. It was so scary. And I knew it was going to be hard. Um, but I had gotten to a place again at the end of 2018, where I just didn't care. I was losing weight again, you know, uh, just mentally, I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to do anything. Um, I'd kind of come to a place where it was like, I think my kids would be better off with me gone than to deal with divorce and a gay mom. And then for
You
whatever.
know, also too, I think it's interesting because I talk to a lot of LGBTQ people
Mhm.
about coming out and the coming out process. And although it's not true for everyone because people have different experiences, I would say the vast majority of people tell me that coming out is not just about being free to talk about who you're sexually attracted to, but that, being that our sexual orientation and our gender identity is just so intricately connected to how we are, how we see the world, how we interact, how we think. And
Yeah.
that when we have to suppress our sexual orientation or our gender identity, it feels like we're having to tamp down on all kinds of aspects of ourselves.
Right. Absolutely.
So coming out, was that more than just being saying I'm attracted to women? Did it feel like just being free to be more of yourself than you had ever allowed yourself to be?
Well, it yes, it did. It felt I think it equally felt good and bad. I mean, I think I felt it was freeing. Um,
But that's probably a process to get that free, right?
it is. It is a big process because I knew that in doing that, in me feeling free and being able to be myself, um, I also knew I was crushing other people and what they thought life was going to be.
This is obviously a very emotional part of your story because, like you said, you cared about your husband, your
Mhm.
ex-husband. You cared about your family so deeply, and you knew if you came out that it was going to cause some pain for some people. Um, but at the same time, I know you and I've talked that reflecting back now, you realize that your coming out wasn't just for your own self, but you also knew that the situation you guys were in was not, the greatest situation for your husband. So
Yeah,
talk a little bit about that, Malia.
yeah. Well, I think that, you know, we spent so many years married and figuring out and navigating what our intimate relationship looked like and and the sacrifices that took place and and I think sometimes you know people look at the person coming out and it's all great and oh my god we get to be ourselves and we're free and it's authentic and I'm happy and all these things and then the other spouse is the one left to figure life out now. And it is so true. That's very true. And I think that is part of the reason, one of the reasons why I hung on as long as I did, because I didn't want it to ever come to that, because I cared about him and I loved him. Um, but also, the other side of that, that I feel like is unfair to the straight spouse is that um, I can say for me, I gypped him, and that's just for lack of better terms. He was gypped. And and yes, his
You
world
couldn't
was
love him the
correct.
way he wanted to be
Right,
loved
right,
by someone of the opposite sex.
right. And the way he deserved to be loved.
Yes.
I know he wanted it, but he deserved it. And
Mhm.
I and that's a big pill to swallow.
Mhm.
Um, that that I I fought so hard for something for so long, for so many reasons, but at the same time, we were both sacrificing. It
Yes.
was, it was hard on both of us um, in other areas. And so asking for the divorce and me coming out turned his world upside down. And, you have to, it's a do over that he didn't ask for. But in the end, I hope that, I mean, he has since remarried um, and I do hope, and I'll always hope that he finds love in someone, and hopefully this new wife is the person to give him the kind of love that I couldn't, and the kind of love that he deserves. Um,
Yeah,
because
that's
that's a
beautiful.
big part. It's a big part that I think some people don't think about.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's
Yes,
unfair. It's unfair to everybody.
it is.
Honestly.
It is. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that is something that we don't always think about is that straight people that are married to someone um, who is whose sexual orientation is not heterosexual,
Right.
make a lot of sacrifices themselves too, over time, especially. And
Absolutely.
so we're just doing everybody you know, a disservice when we encourage anybody to, hide who they really are, and
Right.
hide their sexual orientation or gender identity, um, and try to be what society expects, because it just does lead to, um, hurt and pain
Mhm.
and inauthenticity. And,
Yeah.
we all deserve to be able to be our true selves, and we all deserve to be loved for our true selves, and to be in relationships with people that will enhance that. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things I think about so many people from your generation and before is, you were trying to do what society, told you should do. So you were doing what you and everyone else said was the right thing to do.
Right.
Um,
That
but
was expected, you know?
yes,
That's
what
that
was it?
role. That's that role I was put in, and
Exactly.
I
But um, in doing something that was really against who we were forced also into putting other people in harm's way. I'll never forget when my son came out, I wasn't affirming at the time.
Mhm.
And I don't remember my exact words, but obviously I was trying to put that kind of pressure on him. You're
Right.
supposed to marry a woman, you're supposed to have a family, that's what I dreamed for your life, and that's what I want you to do. And I remember him saying to me, Mom, do you really want me to marry someone and I know that I'm gay? I mean, think about what kind of life that would be for that person.
Right.
Would that really bring that person happiness? Would
Right.
that bring them fulfillment? Would I be doing the right thing to that person? And thank goodness, at the age of 19, he had the wisdom to
Yeah.
think in that way. But also, too, he was much further along. I mean, society was much further along when he came out than
Right.
when you were 19 years old.
Right.
And
Right.
so my point is that if we don't encourage people to, discover who they truly are
Mhm.
and to live as their true authentic self, we're not only harming them, but we're encouraging them to put other people in harm's way. Of course, I know you have no regrets about your family, your kids. I mean, that's
Sure.
not how things go.
Right.
But I know that you do regret that you hurt your ex-husband the way that
Oh,
this did.
absolutely. And, and that's one of the things that that's probably one of the other major factors in doing it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I know. I know. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, I know it's hard. This is real life.
Yeah.
And but Malia, I'm just so grateful that you're willing to share your story, because I do think, what I love about your story is that um, you're so real, you're so authentic, you're willing to be open, and you're one of the most courageous people that I've ever met, because it takes so much courage and tenacity and just a spirit of survival to do what you've done. And I'm so excited about where you are today.
Thank you.
Today, you are engaged to a wonderful woman who I admire so much,
Yes,
Katrina,
I am.
and
Mhm.
you guys are planning a wedding, which I
Yeah,
cannot wait to be there.
I know.
Um,
Very exciting
so,
times.
um, tell me, let's talk a little bit about planning your wedding. Tell me how that's going, because one thing I'm very interested in is, and we can weave this in too. I'm very interested in how your family and friends
Mhm.
have responded to you coming out.
Sure.
Obviously, you and your husband have gotten a divorce. and
Right.
you've moved on and built a life as, living your true self. You,
Right.
you and Katrina were friends, and then it became
Were.
romantic, and now you guys are engaged. So I'm kind of interested in hearing kind of the whole story of how your friends and family are reacting, and you planning your wedding, and how all of this is fitting together, because a very common question that mama bears often ask is, how do we handle our kids weddings and relationships and marriages and families with extended family members and friends who aren't maybe affirming. So let's talk a little bit about that. So I guess let me back up. How did your friends and families respond to you coming out? Mixed
Uh,
bag, I bet.
it was, yeah, it was across the table. It was all over the place. Um, I have friends and family who were surprised but very supportive. I had friends and family who were not surprised, who were supportive, and there have been many who were not supportive. Um, and those people are not in my life. I don't, and that's been very hard. I spent, just for example, there was a time frame in my life where a lot of this happened, where we stayed in one city for 8 years, and so much happened in those 8 years, um, in regards to just life and becoming rooted in a church that um, acted out against us for supporting our gay daughter, um, and and so I lost a lot of deep, good friendships because of that situation with her and coming out and us supporting her. But I worked in the church, so it was like that can't go together. And then those friends that stayed, that supported us for supporting Marley, um, when I came out, um, it changed. So it was kind of okay, with Marley, with my oldest, but then when you get over here to me and doing it, and a divorce, and there's children and all the things, it was sort of like they all put on different boxing gloves, and I didn't get the same response. So out of those 8 years, I have maybe three friends that I still keep in touch with somewhat regularly. Um, and even with Marley's wedding, I even can answer that question twofold. Like, as far as when my oldest married her wife, how we handled those situations, and then now here we are. How are we going to handle those situations with my own wedding?
Okay, well, time has passed, and you have, learned a lot, and you're becoming more and more your true self. And you and Kat,
Mhm.
have a relationship that helps you be more grounded and more confident. So, how are you handling your own wedding now differently than the way you handled your gay daughter's wedding?
Well, honestly, it's I think for ours, it will be similar to the experience that I had with my daughter's wedding with her wife. And we peop if if I have and I have family members um, that won't come because they won't be invited. We do have several family members back home that are not affirming folks, and um, I don't want them there. I don't. A wedding is a time. Well, even life in general, but it's especially a wedding is a time where two people come together to celebrate that love. And if if there's people that can't do that, wholeheartedly and honestly and fully, then they won't receive an invitation. And I think for me, it's probably it's a boundary that I'm having to deal with more so on my end than on Kat's end. But that's what we're going to do, and that's how I have since coming out. That's pretty much how I live life now. I just I don't keep people in my circle who love me, but
I love that. I love what Glennon Doyle says, only love in, only love out.
about
And the only way that can happen is if we set healthy boundaries.
right.
And
Yep.
so I really admire you for doing that. And I wish you and Kat the best in everything. And like I said, I cannot wait to be at that wedding. So as we kind of close up today, and there's so much more you and I could talk about, but we all have things to get to. But as we close today, what what advice would you give to mama bears who just want to be great moms to their LGBTQ kids and wholeheartedly support them, affirm them? What little piece of advice would you tell them?
Well, gosh. I think for me, I would say listen. Just listen. Be there, if I'm talking about mama bears with their reasons, um, it's to just sit next to them, and as they explore and unwind within their story, to be as close as they'll let you be and listen, um, and love as well. Celebrate where you can, um, because when you start placing your expectations on someone else's story, you're setting yourself up for disappointment and possibly failure. I mean, it's a tight fence to walk because everybody is so different. But just patience and be soft and listen and just sit with them. I think is probably was my biggest key. And then, they just figured out it takes time. I mean, it took me almost 50 years, and some of these kiddos are on a fast track to figuring it out. And that's okay too. So
I think that's great advice. You're a great mama bear, and I think your whole story has led you to where you are today. And just thank you so much for sharing with us and letting us learn from you.
absolutely.
I appreciate that. All
Absolutely.
right.
Anytime.
This
Thank
has
you.
been great. Thank you everyone for listening. If you want more information about mama bears, you can visit our website at realmamabears.org, where you will find information about all the groups and resources and programs that we offer. Keep spreading the love. Bye-bye.